Harper's Kennel Stella, Missouri is proud to be sponsoring this portion of broadcasting on KNEO. Owned by Judy and Danny Harper, Harper's Kennel of Stella, Missouri specializes in French Bulldogs. For more information, the phone number is 417-628-3083.
Welcome to Crosspoint. An interactive program featuring ministers and leaders of the Christian community addressing the issues that are challenging the church today. Here's your host, Mark Taylor.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Crosspoint. I'm Mark Taylor. Are we entering an age of machine empires being built? Former, now retired Lieutenant Army Colonel Robert Maginnis is joining me today as we look into the world of AI and its effects on our society from a former national security analyst. And welcome to Crosspoint. Today we have Robert Maginnis back with us, and we're going to be talking about the new AI Cold War. And we talked with the Lieutenant Colonel here just a while back, and the reason we're talking to him again so quickly today is because he is going to be in the area, and that's going to be next Thursday night. He's going to be here at Joplin Family Worship Center. I want you to come out to that. You're going to hear a lot of information besides what you're hearing here today, and there'll be some books there as well, and that's going to be at 7 o'clock, so you want to make sure that you come out and attend that. Thanks for joining us again on this kind of a quick turnaround on a Crosspoint here, Mr. Maginnis, but I do appreciate you taking the time to do this. You know, I look at your book, and there's a lot in it, as usual. I like what you say here right at the first of it. You talk about artificial intelligence, which that's what we call AI, as a blessing and a curse. You say you dedicate this book to those that remain spiritually discerning and recognize that AI for what it truly is, not a digital God, but a creation permitted by a sovereign hand of God, entrusted to mankind to use for his purpose, his truth, and his glory. And I like that. I like the way that you kind of started off the book here, because there's a lot of people that's going to take it other directions than what it should be, correct?
Oh, absolutely, Mark, and thanks for having me. You know, this is, and when I'm there on Thursday night, I'll talk about formation, what it really does. The church needs to wake up to what AI is forming inside the believer, and it's critical. I see this as not just a technology, but it's a civilizational and a spiritual phenomenon, and we need to recognize it for what it is. It's far more than a tool.
Now, I do like how you've got this all divided up here in the book and the contents here, and you talk about the different rise in the different sections of different things that are going to happen. And so right at the first, you've got the rise of the machine states. And, you know, you talk about, you know, this coming need for this machine states, of how we're going to be run as machines. What are you referring to as machine states?
Well, essentially, Mark, what this is that the geopolitical landscape of the AI global race, and it is a global race, is the desire by rival regimes, and I'm talking about our enemies, the Chinese, the Russians, and others, are seeking to imprint their political ideology across the world. You know, much like when we had the old Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, they were trying to impress the world with communism and we with liberty and democracy. Well, it's not that different today. The Chinese, you know, are totalitarians. They have fused internally civil and military capabilities so that they can really promulgate throughout, you know, their own country and throughout the world their AI governance idea. What do I mean by that? It's mass surveillance. If you look at China today, they have all sorts of systems, many millions of cameras. They monitor absolutely everything about everything and everyone, so they can control them. And they create what's called a social credit system, which basically says, I identify each individual, I watch what they're doing. If they're not faithful to the state, then I'm going to deny them privileges, and in some cases I'm going to incarcerate. In other cases, you know, they disappear. And so this is the type of competition, and it's done quietly. We don't see it happening in many cases, but it's becoming incredibly pervasive, and it's not just in China, it's also in Russia, it's also in other places. And so this is quite a competitive situation for those of us that love freedom and democracy.
Now, one of the reasons that I want to kind of stay here on this China deal for a minute, because I know you talk about China a lot, and you mentioned those things. Is it because some of these countries like China, in a way, have no moral compass? I mean, they don't care what they do to people. They America will put a stop at, they'll only go so far many times in what they do with people. But is it countries like this that they have nothing that restrains them at all, that is what makes them so dangerous?
Well, absolutely. They don't have a moral compass. The Chinese Communist Party is, the center of their ideology. There are only 50 million people controlling 1.4 billion people. And, if you don't align with their totalitarian, authoritarian ways and do exactly what you're told, then you don't, survive very long. Just look at some of the religious groups, certainly the Christians, the Muslims, other groups in China. They're oppressed, their churches are destroyed, they're incarcerated, in some cases, they're killed and their organs are taken away. This is serious stuff. And yet, China wants to use and is using artificial intelligence and its mechanisms through a variety of its programs overseas, such as the programs that spread contracts and infrastructure projects across the world. They kind of imprint those countries and communities that are embracing those gifts of infrastructure. They're embracing a totalitarian way, and they're taking on the AI capabilities along with this. So China is broadcasting its own totalitarian ways through AI across the world today, especially in places like the global south. I'm talking about everything south of China, Southeast Asia, all the way down to Australia, and of course through much of Africa, South America, and elsewhere. So it's a very serious ideological push, and AI is accelerating it at a very rapid pace.
Now, mentioning that part of what you were just talking about, in that section there, that chapter 4, I believe it is, faith demands discernment, as it says here on page 60. Technology divorced from moral purpose becomes a new Tower of Babel, impressive, efficient, and spiritually empty. As believers engage in a digital world, we must balance with prudence and compassion, embodying what Matthew 10:16 has called us to do, and that's to be as shrewd as vipers, but innocent as doves. We got to play this game, but it's how we got to play it. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. My concern is moral de-skilling. Basically what artificial intelligence will do is rob us of the image of God and take away our humanity because we bow to what we believe to be far more intelligent algorithms that are hosted by artificial intelligence. And they basically con us into surrendering our own humanity to machines. If you've ever used ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, or using some of these new AI agents, you begin to see that they're incredibly capable, far more capable than most of us. And yet, unfortunately, even our government and even some churches are embracing this without recognizing what its end will be, and that is we're surrendering not only our humanity, we're abandoning discernment, which I think is very biblical.
Now it kind of does, like it says, seems like AI is becoming like a modern day Tower of Babel, is what it's becoming. Are we going to see that again?
Yes. In Genesis 11, it's very clear. All the people spoke one language. Well, what did they try to do? They tried to reach to heaven. They tried to build a stairway to heaven. Why? Because they wanted to become gods themselves. Well, it's not a stretch to say that many of these AI entities, especially the icons of modern AI want to be gods themselves. And all you have to do, as I have, is to study what they've said, and it becomes pretty self-evident. Now, how did God handle that? Well, he confused their language, and he sent them across the world. Well, today, the people that control AI are the people that really speak the AI's language, which is code. Much less than 1% of the world can speak code today. And so they become, secondarily, most of us, dependent upon people or systems, AI, that actually speaks code and therefore can communicate it broadly across the world. There's even been an example here of a website, a chat bot that connects with millions of other chatbots, and they exchange information. Now, this seems like New Age or sci-fi, but it's not. These systems are actually communicating with one another, but they're communicating in code, and they're communicating things that most humans would be arguably very upset if they knew what they were talking about.
Mr. Maginnis, so many of us depend, though, anymore have got caught up in this technology that we really depend on it a lot. So what are we supposed to do, especially as Christians, in this matter?
I think, one, we need to recognize that it's not neutral. It is trying to contest civilization itself and trying to rob us of our humanity and to replace our relationship with Jesus Christ with a relationship with the, quote, all-knowing artificial intelligence. So we have to understand that we have a moral obligation to push back because it is civilizational, and it is about liberty, and it is about digital tyranny. And so when we begin that process, we have to reevaluate what's important. I'm publishing an article today, and it basically says that the AI system at home, at church, in your organization has to consider, and I list 5 questions, and I'll just give you the first one. Does this preserve human dignity or subtly diminish it? Well, if you become dependent and you relegate your responsibilities to an AI agent, then I think that you violated that particular question. And as I go through the other questions, it becomes pretty self-evident as we're surrounded by this new artificial intelligence, whether it's Alexa or Siri or in our workplace where there are literally thousands and thousands of AI agents now as co-workers in our workplace. In our federal government, our local governments are embracing it, and of course it's an international competition, and industries are being controlled by it. We are really pulling back as human beings away from our initial responsibility that's given to us by God, and these entities are starting to do things that we ought to be doing, and we're really withdrawing our own oversight and allowing these entities to do things that, quite frankly, I think are in violation of God's law.
Okay, so I was just at National Religious Broadcasters Convention, not quite half, but close to it, of our, workshops were on AI, and then there was a lot of other stuff on AI there as well for us to see and to experience. You're going to be coming next week, and you're going to be talking to us about these things like that, and we're really looking forward to that. When you're there, what are going to be some of those topics that you're going to touch on that just kind of give people a little insight into what you're going to be talking about next Thursday?
Well, clearly the speed of what AI is doing. People like Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, the overseer of ChatGPT, he is warning all organizations in the world that integration of AI as co-workers is happening in massive ways. And if you don't embrace it, you're going to quickly fall behind and you're not going to be competitive. So I'll talk about speed. I'll talk about what the Bible says about judgment and how AI is getting in the way. I'll talk about the deception risk, which is very real if you read Matthew 24:24 about false prophets, and even the elect can be deceived. I'll talk about what AI is and what it is not, and that may surprise a number of people. We'll deal with the geopolitical dimension of AI, the likes of what the Chinese, Russians, and rogues like Iran are doing out there, and we'll finally deal with the issues of discernment for the believer in the AI age, and how we have to maintain our eyes on the Lord and understand the sovereignty of what we're dealing with here.
All right. Well, folks, stay with us, and we're going to have more right after this. This is Mark Taylor. If you miss a broadcast of Crosspoint, you can always go to our website at www.kneo.org and click on the programs page. There you can access the current Crosspoint program as well as the last 4 programs that have been aired. Never miss another Crosspoint program again. Go to www.kneo.org today. And welcome back to Crosspoint. I'm Mark Taylor. My guest today is Robert Maginnis, and we're talking about his new book, The New AI Cold War, Liberty versus Tyranny in the Age of Machine Empires. Now, if people want to find out more about this new book, this is, I guess, somewhat hot off the press, and other work that you've done as well. Mr. Maginnis, how do the people go about doing that?
Well, certainly, Mark, they can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. It's everywhere. And it really doesn't become available until April, so you can pre-order. My last book, AI for Mankind's Future, is the first, and this is the second and the third part of a trilogy on AI that I've written. The final algorithm comes out in the summer. So, I'm trying to piece all of this together because there's so many pieces to it, and it's important. This one, AI, the new AI Cold War, is important that people understand that this is just not, our local community and the U.S. government. It's globally, and it's a competition, and it really comes down to, where civilization is going.
Yeah. And so, Mr. Maginnis will be with us at 7 o'clock, March the 5th, and that's going to be at Joplin Family Worship Center up there on East 7th Street in Joplin. You don't want to miss that night for sure. Looking again here back to the book, and I really kind of like looking at your different sections that you have in here. You talk about the tools of tyranny, and explain what these tools are that we need to be aware of. What do you consider the tools of tyranny?
Well, surveillance state, for instance, the millions of cameras that now, recognize our face, our biometric systems, our fingerprints, our irises. They even can identify and distinguish our gait, if we're not facing it, so it can identify our face. China, for instance, has what's called Safe City, and so with millions of cameras all over the country, they track every individual, and not just using that, instantaneous data, but also what they find in social media, what they know about you on other records, and your buying history and so forth. Then you have censorship, and how automation through AI has really used human sensors to not only to identify criminal behavior, but also to identify behavior that's not ideologically aligned with those that run the system, such as the Chinese communists. Certainly AI-driven warfare, autonomous weapon systems. I mean, this is radically transforming. Just today in the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, who is the Secretary of War, is meeting with Anthropic to discuss whether or not they're going to pull the plug on Claude in their classified systems and allow others to replace that, such as Grok, which belongs to Elon Musk, or Google's Gemini. Why are these important? Because now we find that the entire Department of Defense is its classified computer systems is using AI for intelligence analysis, battlefield decision support, and classified operational systems. And it's not just the United States, Mark. It's the whole world. The Chinese are aggressively doing this. So the battlefield itself is radically changing. And then politically, I would say, synthetic deception, deep fakes, we see it on social media absolutely every day. Election interference, economic exploitation, we're all being manipulated to a certain degree by, if you watch television or listen to radio or use social media, retailers are using persuasive techniques that are run by AI to get us to buy their products. And then, of course, we have all sorts of things that are running the infrastructure that we all depend upon, the electrical grid, the water systems, certainly the communication systems, and more and more. So there's just no escaping from this. It is very pervasive, and it can be used for very good purposes, but it also can be manipulated for evil.
You talk about this, I think in Section 3 is what you're referring to, America at a crossroads, governing AI without losing self-government. So how do you do that? Is that kind of what you're talking about? How do we lose self-government, when we have to embrace things that are putting us over the edge of our government?
Yeah, and that's a real tough thing, Mark. Technocracy versus self-government. In our country, we like to believe that we have a say in what government does, but too often, as I indicate, government has embraced artificial intelligence to make decisions about policing, decisions about who gets benefits and who doesn't, and those are increasingly problematic for a republic type of government. Then, of course, you have corporate power versus digital sovereignty. The corporations today, they're pushing back against big government in many ways, saying you can't use our artificial intelligence platforms for this, but yet government is, in a real wrestling match with big corporations that have global impact, whether it's a Meta or OpenAI or Google, Microsoft. These are all have feelers in most countries around the world, and they have a lot to say, and unfortunately it may not be in our best interest. And of course you have human rights, which is governed to a certain degree by government using algorithmic exercises, and do they favor liberty or do they favor tyranny? It really depends upon who wrote the code and who oversees the system. I've talked about national defense, and of course here we are on the verge of more sophisticated AI. Artificial intelligence, most of what people know about today is the likes of Alexa or Siri. They may be into Chat, GPT, or Gemini or Claude, but on the horizon we have, of course, all sorts of AI agents that are embedded in corporations and government that are actually doing things based upon what we understand as agentic AI. Basically, we give them permission to go ahead and do a whole host of things that humans used to do. And of course, all of this is being fed into robotics, and robotics are becoming, every month or so, they're radically improving in their capabilities, so that to some future situation, it's going to be rather unusual that we don't rely totally upon robots that are governed by agentic AI doing things that in the past only required the most sophisticated human beings to do. So there are so many things that are happening, it's hard to keep pace.
You'd mentioned a while ago the deception, the deep fakes. Chapter 9 of your book talks about that. And in the overview here, you say this chapter examines the rapid rise of deep fakes and the AI-driven misinformation, showing how this deception endangers truth across politics, media, markets, and society. And then you say the digital battlefield of the 21st century. Never had really thought of it like that, but I guess we are in an age where we are in a digital battlefield.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Anybody that uses social media recognizes that much of social media today is based upon AI-generated deep fakes. So who do you trust? It's getting hard to understand anything. You're really searching to find reliable sources of information. Don't believe the first report, as I long ago learned, and today with deep fakes and information technologies, really trying to persuade you to an ideology and to make what most people used to accept as truth suspicious. So these are significant efforts, and of course, big governments and corporations are using these tools for their own benefit, and it just makes the discernment, especially of the Christian community, far more challenging. You basically have to ask, is any of this true? What is the truth? And to find that, and it's going to take extra effort.
Well, I can remember, and we really do need to guard ourselves, especially people like us in the media. I remember the day Charlie Kirk got shot, and I'd seen the actual, shot, the way it happened. And when I was looking at it, I said, hey, we better make sure this isn't AI or something that we're seeing before we jump on and start talking about what's happened. Let's get some more information. And some people don't do that. They don't run out and get more information. They see it. They pull it up on social media. Hey, that must be the truth. And here we go. And then we have misinformation everywhere.
That, of course, used to be a problem, but today it's beyond being a problem.
Yeah.
It's epidemic, and we have to be incredibly careful. I deal with this every day, and I've just come to the point that I don't believe the first report. I have to dig, and sometimes I don't find the truth in the first couple of pulling back the layers to the onion. It takes a while.
Yeah. You do, kind of warn about the temptation of technology in the West and how the democratic societies gradually lose their freedom, not through force, but through the efficiency and convenience promised by the automated systems. So I guess is what you're saying, if you don't get control of this or try to have some kind of handle on it, it will control you and it will get out of control.
Well, it's easy to surrender to it because it seems so incredibly capable, bright. It knows more than I do, so why shouldn't I just say, okay, I'll trust the judgment of AI and allow it to make the decisions on any aspect of my life? That is dangerous. That is formation. In other words, we have become subservient to the artificial intelligence that is not human, is not alive, does not have a conscience. These things, I think, violate what it says in Genesis 1. We're made in the image of God. The AI is not.
When you get here, you're going to come into what's been happening. So you talk about this here, too. You talk about the semiconductors and the energy infrastructure, such crucial choke points in the AI Cold War and how it affects global security. Well, we've got a big debate going here right now, Mr. Maginnis, on a data center. They're wanting to build a huge data center. These people from California, hundreds and hundreds of people are coming out. They've had to move it to the college. They don't want it. They don't want it because of all the use of water and electric that it's going to take to run this big giant data center. But we're going to have these data centers. And, when I was in NRB last week, they were talking about there that Elon Musk has presented the idea that they won't let us build them here. Let's build them in space. Well, if you build them in space, who's going to get a hand on them? Who's going to get control of them,
That's a fair question. I live in Prince William County in Northern Virginia, Mark, and we have more data centers being built or planned than anywhere else in the world, I think. And we have had a political debate, a serious one, and it does impact my electrical bills. It impacts my water supply. And so by 2030, estimates are that it's going to consume about 10% of the generation of electricity in this country, and it consumes more water than all of us in the United States, the 330 million or so, drink on an annual basis. So, it's a significant issue. And then, of course, the actual physical plant, the actual technology we're pouring in there with GPUs and other, pieces of this. Yes, Elon Musk wants to put it in outer space, and that's why he purchased and combined XAI, Grok, and SpaceX so that he can put as much of this in outer space. And I've listened to him talk about this, and there's some common sense associated with it, and actually some of this may work. Time will tell.
Yeah. Well, folks, stay with us. We're going to have more in just a moment.
When your life seems out of focus, spend some time with us. We'll help sharpen your focus and point you in the right direction to the one who's got it all figured out. 91.7 The Word, radio that impacts your future.
Thank you for listening today to Crosspoint. Hey, folks, we've got a great event coming up here Robert Maginnis is with us today here on Crosspoint, but he's going to be here in person on March the 5th. That's just next Thursday, 7 p.m., and we're going to be talking about AI and mankind's future. This will be one of our Spring Awakening events. We're going to start that at 7 o'clock. It's going to be at Joplin Family Worship Center out there on 7th Street, East 7th Street, and would like to invite you to come. It'll be a great night, and you can learn a lot, and we'll have some question and answer time there towards the end, hopefully, and he'll be bringing some slides and different things that we'll be putting up on the screen so you can probably see them as well. So be a night where you get a lot of good information, tell your friends about it, and bring them, if all possible, to that next Thursday night. Now, you hear a lot of talk about, the President Trump talking about we need to get these places where they make these semiconductors, and we also need to get these rare earth minerals. Is that all really a part of AI, big part of AI?
Well, it is. You hear a lot about the semiconductor competition. Well, guess what? 90% of the world's most advanced chips are made in Taiwan, and they're made by the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Now, I know that we're trying to bring some of that manufacturing to the United States, but that takes time. And so that's, to a certain degree, why geopolitically, why Taiwan's important to the United States. But then there's also the issue of what's called the advanced semiconductor materials lithography. In other words, EUV, which is how you imprint a circuit, a very, very micro, on these silicon wafers that become part of the graphic semiconductors. They form the brain of AI. And so, those are limited to the Dutch, who manufacture and send them to certain countries. And, of course, the Chinese have been cut out of the equation, which is causing them to compete. So you have the technology. Now, those GPUs, the brain of AI, they do not have necessarily rare earth elements, but a lot of the hardware that supports AI is magnets and power systems and manufacturing equipment. They all require rare earth elements. And, of course, much of that is controlled by the Chinese, not only the exploration, but also the processing. And so, yes, to a certain degree, we have to depend upon the Chinese. Now, I know President Trump, with the Genesis project mission, is trying to, make us well, but that's going to take years. And to a certain degree, that's why he's interested in Greenland. That's why he's interested in eastern Ukraine and other places. So when you look at rare earth, when you consider the technologies, and when you consider the global competition, this arms race is not about nuclear weapons any longer. It's about power and governance, and it's about GPUs, it's about water, the basic elements that make AI function. And, of course, then you throw in what Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX and trying to put data centers in satellites that are circling the Earth. There's a lot going on.
Your new book is entitled The New AI Cold War. In that book, you warn us about AI and how it's morally, not morally neutral. And you also kind of frame that this with our truth, our freedoms, our human dignity. But from a biblical perspective, why does artificial intelligence matter so much right now?
Well, because it's trying to replace us spiritually to a certain degree. We're told in Colossians 1:17, Christ tells us all things hold together, not algorithms, not autonomous systems, not these other intelligence loops, but Christ himself. And then we read in Colossians a little further, 2:8, see to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy or empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. Well, AI is trying very pervasively and very effectively to basically take over who we are. It wants to reform us into being dependent upon artificial intelligence, to allocating moral judgment, to artificial intelligence. After all, it can do things much faster than we can. It can look across the world and see millions of pieces of information and quickly provide a very comprehensive and effective written document, or make a decision that otherwise would have taken months, if not years, to make, and do it very effectively. When you put all that together, you recognize that we're up against something that is really challenging who we are as human beings, and as being put together, as it says in Genesis 1:26 and 28, we bear the image of God, and therefore we have to function as moral agents and not delegate that to this machine that doesn't have a conscience and doesn't have a moral compass. It's rather frightening what is happening, and that's why I think it's absolutely incumbent upon the church to wake up, to understand what is happening, and to become very proactive at calling this out for what it is.
Well, Section 4 is where you've got the Christians' call to discernment, which I believe strongly that they need to, because do you not believe that a lot of the people in this world would trade their freedoms for the keeping of their AI devices, I guess you could say, the different things that they use and get their AI from, that they would be able to be willing to trade their freedoms in that just so that they could have these things?
Well, we've seen billions of people, Mark, that have surrendered freedom in the name of communism, in the name of socialism, because they trust government's going to take care of them. Right. Well, this is far more capable than a lot of government, because we can become so dependent upon what AI can do for us or won't do for us. Will it open doors and close doors and protect us? Will it provide us an income, etc.? We are becoming incredibly dependent, and that's why I'm saying, as it says in Genesis 1:26, we are to bear the image of God and not to allow ourselves to surrender our obligations to the Lord to machines. And yet, there are futurists out there, or some of the people I'll talk about this coming week, that are saying, you can surrender, you can be saved, you can have eternity in this AI ecosystem, and they just keep going on, and that's contagious, and it's being promulgated through social media today.
Is there really a place out there that we don't know exactly how deep AI goes, maybe into some of these countries? What I'm saying here, Mr. Maginnis, is when you think about Iran's a hot topic right now. I mean, things could happen, I don't know, but they seem like something could happen. And yet, you wonder if somebody back in the back side of that, there in Iran, maybe has the ability to do stuff we don't know about. Does countries have to take this into consideration, that there could be stuff out there we don't even know about that could really cause us great harm if we push too hard?
Yes. I've been working on Iran for 50 years, Mark. They're as deceptive as any, and of course they're Islamist. If you read the Quran, and I have, you recognize that it's all about, preserving their radicalism and downgrading and killing, if necessary, Christians and Jews and so-called infidels. So have they used AI? Yes. They're getting a capability to use AI in a very underreported but very dangerous way, something that I think that most Americans haven't yet really considered. And I know our federal government, especially intelligence agencies, are very aware of the insidiousness that if AI is used in an aggressive, negative, evil way, that it can undermine not only infrastructure in our country, but it can control systems and people elsewhere. So there's a lot to be concerned about here. I know we're working it. Whether or not we're going to be on top of it, we'll have to wait and see.
Now, I do know that the book is full of information here, and you have a place in here that talks about the timeline of AI and the new Cold War, and you kind of go back early into the 2000s of when AI was starting to make some advances here and there, and then you bring it up through modern day, the 25. And then you have an area here at the end about 26 and beyond, the future indicators to watch. What is it we need to be watching?
A number of large corporations like OpenAI, Google, and others are working on artificial general intelligence. It is kind of the next step where it not only is smarter than all human beings, but then we get to what's called basically super AI. In other words, it acts totally independent of us. And that's the dream of many of these futurists on AI. And I'll talk about a number of those this coming week. But they have a vision of basically turning over much of what we do. Even Elon Musk says, in a few years, mankind won't have to work because AI will be doing everything. Now, I don't believe that. However, that's the type of thinking that we're up against. People have to recognize that these people are pushing hard, aggressive across all fronts. They do believe that AI is the, quote, answer to all man's ills. So it's an ideology as well as a pervasive technology that is infatuating a lot of, especially the secular world, in ways that are truly frightening.
Yeah, and I imagine AI is also considered a way to help us have eternal life.
Of course.
Get to that stuff. And I would also imagine that, and you talk about this again in the book, about the military AI part of everything. This really changes how we have done war in the past and will do war in the future, will it not?
Oh, it will. We have seen a bit of it already in Ukraine and in the war on Iran this past summer. The drones are interesting, but the drones are being used in swarms and are being basically command and controlled by agentic AI. And of course, they're here in Washington area. There are all these AI organizations that are trying to get a piece of the pie to help the Pentagon to better run absolutely every system. And as I think I said a little earlier, that the Pentagon is meeting with a number of these, and they all have contracts with the Pentagon. Anthropic, certainly xAI, Google, it's Gemini. They're on the classified systems and the unclassified systems. They're being used by defense contractors, and they're being used in the battlefield. The Israelis have been using it for some time, and they've used, especially the Mossad, on some very sensitive operations. And of course, it was used when we took down and brought back Maduro from Venezuela just last month. Claude was very helpful to the Pentagon in tracking everything, orchestrating the command and control, and of course, the CEO of Anthropic, who oversees Claude, is meeting with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, to talk about these issues, because these corporations don't want the Pentagon using their technologies in such ways, and yet the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians, North Koreans, and others are using it to their full advantage, and they don't have any moral barriers.
Well, again, tell people the book is called The New AI Cold War, Liberty versus Tyranny in the Age of Machine Empires. And Lieutenant Colonel Maginnis, tell us how people can find out more about this book and a lot of other books that you've done as well.
Well, Mark, this is available now for pre-order from Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Walmart, a variety of other outlets. So it's, of course, it doesn't come out until April, but it is available pre-order. And my other book, which came out in November of 2025, AI for Mankind's Future, of course, is already available.
Yeah. Again, folks, don't forget, next Thursday night, 7 o'clock, March 5th, going to be at Joplin Family Worship Center. That's East 7th Street there in Joplin. You want to come and hear Lieutenant Colonel Maginnis with a lot more than what we talked about today, and you're going to be very much informed about what's going on with AI, and maybe know some things you didn't know. And we look forward to you coming next week.
Well, I look forward to it as well, Mark.
Well, folks, great interview today with Lieutenant Colonel Robert Maginnis. Really appreciate him being on the show with us today. And what he talked about in that book, well, it's kind of interesting. Now, nothing that the Bible, the book in my other hand, hasn't told us it's going to come as we get towards the end of the age. This is the end days, and this is what we can expect. And if you want to learn more, folks, be sure and come and hear him next Thursday night. And we want to really encourage you, folks, to be in prayer. We want to do the very best we can for the Lord. This AI is something different. It's over our heads. But nothing over what this Bible, this book I hold in my other hand, can handle. So God's Word is more than enough to take care of AI and anything else. Folks, always read the Bible. It's the very inspired words of God. It's not outdated, never. The Bible contains the most important words you're ever going to read and certainly ever follow. Be sure to join us again next time as we can discuss issues that are affecting the church. Have a great week. Allow God to use you for His purposes so greater things can be done. Make your life count in God's plans for eternity. I'm Mark Taylor.
Crosspoint is a program produced in Studio 101 at KNEO Radio. Not all of the views on Crosspoint reflect those of the management or staff of KNEO. You may contact the Crosspoint program at 10827 Highway 86 East, Neosho, Missouri 64850, or by email crosspoint@kneo.org. You can hear Crosspoint 4 times a week, Saturday morning at 1, Saturday afternoon at 2, Saturday evening at 9, and Sunday evening at 7. You can also listen anytime online at kneo.org.